We are now 24 hours away from Sony's big summer PlayStation showcase, which is essentially the equivalent of their normal E3 press conference, but considering there's no E3 this year, this is going to be where they have all the big game announcements. I am really looking forward to this. I think this is going to be a great show, and the more I sat down thinking about my predictions, the more I was like, I should just sit down and do a video. Hopefully, this doesn't age too poorly. Let's jump right into my predictions. And the very first thing I want to touch on is what exactly Sony has already said about this PlayStation showcase, because they have set the expectation to be relatively high for this event. I feel like a lot of the time they'll announce a state of play and then people have like mainline Nintendo Direct predictions for it, and then sometimes their expectations are too high. They watch the state of play, maybe there's like one or two games that they're interested in, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this was a terrible event. And I think Sony knows that people feel like that sometimes, and they are still doubling down and saying this is going to be a big deal, because they specifically mentioned that the show is going to run a bit over an hour, focus on PS5 and PSVR 2 games in development from top studios, and it also says to expect a glimpse at several new creations from PlayStation Studios, as well as spellbinding games from our third-party partners and indie creators. So there is a lot of stuff that is going to be shown in this. Big third-party games, big first-party games, and probably some big indie titles as well. That already should let you know that this is going to be a really big event. And you know, I want to start my predictions with something that I have not seen anybody mentioning in the lead up to this PlayStation showcase, which is really surprising to me, considering how much this developer has meant to the history of the PlayStation systems over the course of the past 2 decades. And that is Ueda's new game. Obviously, the developer behind Ico and The Last Guardian and Shadow of the Colossus. Now, a lot of people know Japan studio closed down, but Ueda made his own studio called Gen Design, and if I'm remembering correctly, about 2 years ago, they released a New Year's card that teased some type of upcoming project that we have since heard nothing about. This absolutely feels like the place to talk about that. Now, as for how exactly this game will play, I'm really not too sure. I do feel like there will be some type of emotional through line with the gameplay. That's always kind of the case with their games, whether it's Ico or Shadow of the Colossus or The Last Guardian. I hope the gameplay is a little better than The Last Guardian. I wasn't a huge fan of that title, but I love Shadow of the Colossus. And actually, I have recently been replaying the PS4 remake of Shadow of the Colossus that Bluepoint did a couple years ago, and that leads me right into my next prediction. I think we are going to see that rumored Bluepoint Metal Gear remake, whether that is Metal Gear Solid 1 or Metal Gear Solid 3. There have been conflicting reports. There's been lots of different rumors out there. I feel like if they are working on a new remake game, this is going to be the place to announce it. You guys know this if you're a fan of my channel. I love Metal Gear. I am hankering for some type of new Metal Gear experience, and I really don't want Konami to go off and make a Metal Gear without Kojima. I would rather they just take what's already been made for them and they go, here you go, let's hand this over to Bluepoint, let's hand it over to a good developer to remake the game, you know, polish things up a bit, make it look really nice, and update it for a modern audience. That's all I really need to do. MGS3 is one of my all-time favorite video games. They don't really need to touch that to make it good. And while we're on the topic of Kojima games, that also brings into question whether or not we are going to see Death Stranding 2 at this event. Death Stranding 2 was absolutely my favorite announcement at the Game Awards last year, and actually the Game Awards and Jeff Keighley are kind of the main reason why I feel like it might not be at this PlayStation showcase. I do think it's more likely that we see more of Death Stranding 2 at the Summer Games Fest and not here during the PlayStation showcase, but I still feel like there is an opportunity for it. The other big thing working against Death Stranding 2 being at this PlayStation showcase thing is if those Metal Gear remake rumors are true, I don't know how Kojima would feel about his new game being shown off during the same conference that ends up announcing a remake of another one of his old games at a studio that he now has bad blood with. I just feel like they wouldn't necessarily mesh. I think it's going to be one or the other. I do think it's more likely that we see Metal Gear, but I do think there is a possibility that we see Death Stranding 2 as well. Now, moving away from the third-party games and bringing things back to first-party, there are a couple titles that I do expect to see during this PlayStation showcase. First and foremost, there is going to be something Spider-Man 2 related. There was just recently that tweet that was made by the developer confirming that once again the game is a single-player focused experience. I feel like they're probably going to want to show that during the PlayStation showcase. That is their big Game of the Year game that we know of. as of right now, as of this recording, they could end up announcing something and go, hey, by the way, it drops at the end of the year and we're announcing it during the showcase. But for what we know right now, that does seem to be the big PlayStation Game of the Year kind of title. And I really do love the Spider-Man games. I loved Miles Morales. I platinumed it. I loved the original Spider-Man. I platinumed that as well. Some of you who are longtime fans of the channel know that I basically no-lifed the original Spider-Man over the course of 3 days, platinumed the entire thing, was absolutely obsessed with it. And of course, I just like that franchise, and the new Spider-Verse movie is coming out. It just makes a lot of sense for there to be a big focus on Spider-Man 2 during this event, and I can't wait to see more of it. Another thing I expect to see from one of their first-party developers is the DLC for God of War Ragnarok. I am supremely excited for this. I love God of War Ragnarok, absolutely one of my favorite games last year, and I think, honestly, that studio can kind of do no wrong at this point, and whatever they end up making for DLC, I will absolutely be there day one. I am assuming it's going to be Atreus focused, but they could end up really surprising us and doing something weird and wacky. Either way, I am there for it, and I do think the DLC for God of War Ragnarok is essentially a lock for this presentation. And another first-party experience that I think is pretty much a lock for this PlayStation Showcase is whatever that Last of Us multiplayer experience thing is going to be. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there originally going to be a multiplayer mode in Last of Us 2, and then they removed it and they said it was going to be its own thing, and then we haven't heard ever since, but now there's a successful HBO Max show for The Last of Us. Again, I don't really follow Last of Us. I'm not a huge fan of that franchise. It's a little too dark for me. I'm just really not a huge fan of Naughty Dog in general, which I know is shocking as somebody who really loves PlayStation, but I do feel like there is going to be something there for The Last of Us fans. And last but not least, two other first-party offerings that I think are going to end up being at this PlayStation Showcase are, one, some type of gameplay teaser for the upcoming Wolverine game. I don't think it's going to be a huge focus because, again, their focus this year is on Spider-Man 2, and they might not want to have two Marvel games competing with each other, but I still feel like there's a lot of hype behind Wolverine, and that game is going to be vastly different from what Spider-Man 2 is going to be, and so I feel like it wouldn't hurt them to show it off here, but I also don't think they really need to. I feel like the rest of this year is kind of Sony's year to lose, and I feel like they don't need to show off too much of Wolverine in order to get people excited about that game. But something I do think could end up being at this PlayStation Showcase that has not yet been announced that I am supremely excited for, but it's also going to force me to go back to my backlog and actually finish the original game, is Ghost of Tsushima 2. I loved everything about that original title. I don't know why I never went back and finished it. I think that is one of the coolest franchises that Sony currently has, and I want to see them do more in that universe. Again, this showcase feels like the perfect opportunity to show off whatever they've been working on for the sequel to that beloved game. But let's hop back to the third-party announcements that could end up being part of this PlayStation Showcase tomorrow. I do feel like there's going to be a big Square Enix presence. Final Fantasy 16 obviously comes out next month. The preview embargo just lifted. If you haven't watched my hands-on preview, go watch that video. And that game is shaping up to be something really, really special. I think Sony and Square and everybody else involved is very proud of that title. I do think there's going to be more of that game shown off during this. I also feel like they could end up dropping that demo that's been rumored, and I hope and pray that they end up doing what they did with the Octopath Traveler 2 demo and the Triangle Strategy demos, and that it's just the prologue of the game. You can play through it, and then you could carry over your save data to the final game. That would be phenomenal. But of course, while on the topic of Final Fantasy, I think the other thing I have to discuss is the possibility of Final Fantasy Remake Part 2 being shown during this showcase in any capacity whatsoever. And I think this might be controversial. I don't think they're going to end up showing it at all. I think they want the focus for the Final Fantasy franchise specifically to be squarely, no pun intended, on Final Fantasy 16 right now. And I think if we do end up seeing a teaser trailer for the Final Fantasy 7 Part 2 remake, I think that will end up being during the Tokyo Game Show a little bit later this year. But there is one other big Square game that I have to bring up as your resident Disney fanboy, and that is Kingdom Hearts 4. I think if they want to make a huge splash and have a massive surprise at this event, show us another trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4. Obviously, that game is a ways off right now, but I do think that game has been worked on longer than people are expecting, and I do think they probably do have something to show for that game at this point. So give it to us. Inject it directly in my veins, please. Some type of teaser trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4 to add on to what we already saw last year. Obviously, there was that potential tease of a Star Wars world. I want to see more. Give me that Disney JRPG goodness, please, and thank you. Another thing I'm surprised a lot of people aren't really talking about right now is Monster Hunter. I feel like the time is probably right for Capcom to announce the next mainline Monster Hunter game. Sunbreak has now been out for a while, Rise has been out for even longer, and I feel like people are starving for the next Monster Hunter World type experience, like a Monster Hunter game on a Sony platform. This might be the place to do it. I think the only reason they might not show it is because we'll definitely see something Street Fighter related during this as well. Street Fighter 6, just like Final Fantasy 16, also comes out next month. There's just a lot of stuff coming out on PlayStation in the next couple months, and Capcom might not want to necessarily split their focus. I think the focus right now is on Street Fighter, but I think that could be a really cool surprise to announce the next mainline Monster Hunter during the showcase too. And another thing that I think is probably going to happen during the showcase, which is something that Sony is historically very good at, throwing shade at Microsoft. And here's why. I'm sure many of you remember this.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
Obviously, the sentiment around Xbox over the past couple months has not been all that great, and I do think Sony is going to take this as an opportunity to twist the knife even further and maybe take a developer that has a history with Microsoft properties and then maybe have them develop a game on a Sony platform. I'm not really too sure what that could be. It could be any number of things, but it's a pretty easy prediction for me because, again, I know Sony likes to throw shade, and that could be any number of developers and any number of games. So I think that's one I could already mark off my bingo card. Something that is originally like some type of Microsoft historic developer or property coming on over to PlayStation. And of course, it wouldn't be a RogersBase video without some type of anime-related prediction, so I have to throw this out there. There have been rumors recently of a new Jump game in development, whether that is a Jump Superstars or a Jump Force 2 or whatever. I think if that game does exist, it will be shown off during this PlayStation showcase. I think there's a lot of cool potential actually for some type of new Jump game. They could use Spy Family, Chainsaw Man, a lot of their newer properties mixed in with their classic properties, have maybe a new form of Luffy shown off during it as well. The timing might be right. I feel like that could be a really cool announcement. Obviously, that would be for a much more niche audience than something like, say, GTA 6 or like even another big first-party announcement. But I do feel like if that game is in development, if the rumors are true, and we are getting a new Jump game, I think it'll be shown off during the PlayStation Showcase. But I think that's going to wrap it up for my predictions for tomorrow's PlayStation Showcase. I wanted to keep this relatively short and sweet because, again, we're going to know whether or not I'm wrong or right about any of this tomorrow. So if you want to catch my reaction live, you can catch me live on twitch.tv/RogersBase tomorrow, where I will be streaming my reaction to the event. And then, of course, immediately afterwards, I will be uploading my full reaction right here to the YouTube channel. So if you don't want to miss that, click the subscribe button, leave a like on this video if you liked anything I had to say. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye, everybody.